The hatch now open.
Astronauts face many dangers hurling themselves into outer space, but a new study highlights a different kind of threat: anemia. Astronauts are known to experience space anemia, a red blood cell deficiency while on missions, but until now it was thought to be temporary. Doctors attributed it to the destruction of red blood cells, or hemolysis, resulting from fluid shifts as astronauts' bodies accommodated to weightlessness, and again as they reaccommodated to gravity. But Dr. G. Trudell of the University of Ottawa, who led a study of 14 astronauts funded by the Canadian Space Agency, says this anemia is much more impactful.
We thought we knew about space anemia, and we did not. We had assumed that this was a very quick phenomenon of adaptation and nothing was going on. And now we're discovering that's not the case. That space has a primary specific effect on red blood cell regulation.
Normally, the body destroys and replaces nearly 2 million red blood cells per second. Trudell's team found astronauts' bodies destroyed 3 million red blood cells per second during their 6-month missions.
The message is there's a knowledge gap here that we need to fill in terms of the mechanism, in terms of the countermeasures, in terms also of the planning of the mission. So will we need some blood products or artificial blood products on board the mission to Mars, given the fact that there is destruction ongoing? Would we need iron supplements at one point if we can't recycle all of the iron to make new red blood cells, and so on?
Having fewer red blood cells in space is not a problem when your body is weightless, he added. But after landing on Earth, and potentially on other planets, anemia could affect astronauts' energy, endurance, and strength. His team reported on Friday in Nature Medicine that a year after returning to Earth, the astronauts' red blood cells had not completely returned to pre-flight levels. Researchers said even space tourists lining up for short trips might have to stay home if they are at risk for anemia or red blood cell deficiency. Trudell's team is studying ways to fix the problem.
Financial stocks dragged the Dow lower Friday after some of the biggest banks reported disappointing earnings. A drop in retail sales in December added to the gloom. Investors responded by rotating away from cyclical stocks back to tech stocks like Microsoft and Tesla, helping push up the Nasdaq. But Toes Asset Management CEO Phil Toes warns that tech stocks could get hit hard.
Similar to what we saw in the internet bubble burst, growth got hammered and tech got hammered, and value did, on a relative basis, much better. So if this downturn continues, and we don't know that it will, but if it continues, value could potentially be a much stronger sector or place to be than growth stocks, where we could see 50% declines or more if it really picks up negative momentum.
The Dow shed 200 points, or roughly 0.5%. The S&P 500 closed nearly flat, but the Nasdaq gained more than 0.5%. On the week, the three indexes lost ground. J.P. Morgan Chase was among the top decliners on the Dow and S&P, dropping more than 6%. The lender's quarterly profit fell 14%. The bank, an economic bellwether, warned that soaring inflation, the Omicron threat, and normalization of trading levels could challenge the banking sector's growth in the coming months. Profit dropped more steeply at Citigroup, whose shares shed 1%. One bright spot, Wells Fargo. Its profit nearly doubled, topping Wall Street's targets. Leading the S&P's list of gainers, Las Vegas Sands and Wynn Resorts. Shares rose after Macau's government capped the number of new casino companies allowed to operate. Stock markets in the U.S. will be closed Monday for the Martin Luther King holiday.
The founder and leader of the far-right Oath Keepers group, Stuart Rhodes, on Friday pleaded not guilty to seditious conspiracy charges for his alleged role in the deadly January 6, 2021 attack on the U.S. Capitol. Rhodes made a brief initial appearance in federal court in Plano, Texas, wearing handcuffs and leg irons. Rhodes and 10 other people were accused by the Justice Department on Thursday of plotting to storm the Capitol by force in a failed bid to block Congress from certifying President Joe Biden's 2020 election victory. The 56-year-old is the most high-profile defendant of more than 700 charged so far for allegedly taking part in the attack on the Capitol by former President Donald Trump's supporters. The riot was fueled by Trump's false claims that his election defeat was the result of fraud. A prosecutor at Friday's hearing said the Justice Department will request that Rhodes be detained while he awaits trial. James Lee Bright, a lawyer for Rhodes, told reporters Rhodes intends to fight the charges. Rhodes and his associates are the first people charged with seditious conspiracy for their alleged role in the attack. That charge can carry a sentence of up to 20 years in prison. The indictment portrayed Rhodes as a ringleader who warned his members to prepare for a, quote, bloody and desperate fight to prevent Joe Biden from becoming president.
My bipartisan infrastructure law includes the largest investment in our nation's bridges since the creation of the interstate highway system. Bridges to connect us. Bridges to make America work. Across our country right now, there are 45,000 bridges, 45,000, that are in poor condition. We're seeing photos of some of them behind me in all 50 states. Today, we're releasing the first year of that program, which is $5.5 billion. $5.5 billion to states and tribes to repair and rebuild bridges to make them safer and more usable. This is an investment that's going to help connect entire towns and regions to new opportunities. With this investment, we're sending the message to those communities and to the people who call them home. You matter.
A common sight at U.S. supermarkets these days, a lack of milk, pasta, berries, and more, as supply chain issues leave store shelves empty.
There's no meat, no toilet paper. It's crazy.
High demand for groceries combined with soaring freight costs and Omicron-related labor shortages are creating a new round of backlogs. Katie Dennis is VP of Communications and Research at the Consumer Brands Association, a trade group for packaged goods.
What we're dealing with right now is we had a supply chain that was kind of already at its breaking point, and the Omicron wave has been really devastating in terms of a labor impact. We don't have a food shortage, we do have a labor shortage.
The consumer packaged goods industry is missing around 120,000 workers, out of which only 1,500 jobs were added last month, Dennis said. And the National Grocers Association said that many of its grocery store members were operating with less than 50% of their workforce capacity. Meanwhile, experts say demand over the last 5 months has been as high or higher than it had been in March 2020 at the beginning of the pandemic. Growers of perishable produce across the West Coast say they are paying nearly triple pre-pandemic trucking rates to ship things like lettuce and berries before they spoil. Warren Briggs left his market just outside of Washington, D.C. with far less than what was on his shopping list.
And I went to get some bananas, and there's just 4 or 5 bananas. There's been no salads for 2 weeks. And so, you know, you look around and you go to places and there's nothing there. It's just, we just never had this before.
The CEO of ConAgra Brands, maker of Bird's Eye frozen vegetables, told investors last week that supplies from its U.S. plants could be constrained for at least the next month, while Albertsons CEO said he expects the supermarket chain to confront more supply chain challenges over the next 4 to 6 weeks.